Really? I'm really nervous about my stuff in my
Proclamation. Whereas many Missoula community members see prejudice and intolerance every day, and whereas Missoula is one of the most diverse cities in Montana, and whereas Missoula residents value diversity and equality, and we know our strength as a community is based on treating each other fairly and respectfully and ensuring safe, empowering, and inclusive communities, and whereas diversity strengthens Missoula, where it contributes to the thriving and colorful culture throughout our community, and whereas appreciation of diversity among Missoula community members creates a climate of understanding and acceptance that places the people of our city in the forefront of efforts to ensure that everyone has the right to live in conditions of peace, dignity, and mutual respect, regardless of perceived race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, creed, sex, age, marital or family status, physical or mental disability, sexual orientation, and gender orientation, identity, or expression. Now, therefore, John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula in the state of Montana, hereby proclaimed on April 2nd, 2010 as Missoula Diversity Day in Missoula, Montana, and encourages all citizens to take part in the activities of Diversity Day to work together in ending prejudice, preventing violence, and strengthening our community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nikki Manlove, and I'd like to welcome you to this reenactment of the historic April 12, 2010 Missoula City Council hearing to add sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression to Missoula, Montana's already existing anti-discrimination law. The original hearing began at 7 p.m. and did not end until 1:47 a.m., 6 hours later, a record for Missoula. MCAT, Missoula Cable Access Television, streamed a live video of the hearing to local Missoula bars, preempting the opening of baseball season. These edited redactions of testimony were taken from the transcripts of the hearing, which are public record. No words have been added or altered. Not all the testimonies are included, which is no reflection on their value. One request: kindly refrain from commenting on the words of the person being interpreted. 6 members of your community have volunteered to read. Please remember, the words they express are not their own and should not be interpreted as or confused to be the personal opinion of the reader. Those of you in the audience are invited to get comfortable, close your eyes, and move around or exit the workshop as you wish, as happens in many city council meetings. The outcome of the hearing will be revealed at the end of the session. A discussion of this exercise will follow the hearing, and I'd like to welcome the following readers to the stage: Lauren Varney, Katie Koga, Kyle Brester, Debbie Florence, Erin McPeck, and Susie Hampton.
Martha Rabine, City Clerk, said, "The meeting of the Missoula City Council was called to order by Mayor John Engen at 7 p.m. in the council chambers at 140 West Pine Street. Minutes of the regular meeting of April 5th were approved as submitted. Mayor Engen proclaimed April 12, 2010 as Missoula Diversity Day."
Mayor Engen said, "Typically, ladies and gentlemen, we have a staff report from one of our staff, but we have a number of folks sponsoring this legislation this evening. So we'll have presentations from those folks to begin with as part of our staff report. In the interest of fairness, I had a request from folks who have led some of the efforts in opposition of the ordinance, and I've offered them time to speak as well. My recollection is that Ms. Rye was going to begin our staff report this evening."
Alderwoman Rice said, "Just to let you know, for people who haven't been here before, I've been talking for hours in this chamber. over the past 6 years every week, and I'm scared to death. So I just wanted to let you know that this is the most packed we've seen it. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, Dave Strohmeyer and I are introducing an ordinance that would add sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression to our already existing illegal discrimination law. Missoula protects on the base of race, color, national origin, ancestry, religion, creed, marital or family status, and disability. Most of this is reflected in state and federal law, but right now sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression are not in state or federal law. This ordinance would extend equality and protection to sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. We hopefully will join 129 other cities, 21 states, and the District of Columbia in amending this short-sightedness. I want to address some of the myths that have arisen, and one of those is the idea of bathrooms. There is nothing in this ordinance about bathrooms. There are no laws right now governing who can use which bathroom. In spite of this, common sense seems to have prevailed over the years, and we have not had chaos in our bathrooms as of yet. The proposed ordinance in terms of public accommodations does not change any criminal laws, local, state, or federal. Nothing in the proposed ordinance permits or requires any access to any place or public accommodation for the purpose or intent of engaging in criminal conduct. There is no evidence that we could find in the other 129 other cities of any outbreak of crime after laws like this have passed. Finally, I just wanted to say that civil rights are about responding to a history of discrimination. Who you are, who you love, shouldn't be a hazard to your employment or cause you to be denied housing or services from businesses like restaurants or hardware stores. When a person is denied employment or housing, they're denied equal footing, and there is a need to make that discrimination illegal. Missoula is a wonderful place. Tonight, this is one piece of Missoula showing that it is an open and safe place.
Alderman Strohmeyer said, "Thank you, Stacy, and thanks to everyone who came out tonight to share your thoughts on this ordinance, which I think is an important step, indeed a historic step for the city of Missoula. I think we'll hear from others tonight. Discrimination is a very real and present issue in the city of Missoula based on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. There have been those who have articulated doubts about that, but I think you'll hear overwhelming testimony tonight that discrimination is real and does exist in Missoula. With that, I look forward to hearing from folks tonight."
Nikki Zupanik, Public Policy Director, ACLU of Montana, said, "I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. Non-discrimination laws protect against arbitrary and unfair decisions, and the characteristics that are typically protected are race, gender, age, religion. There are reasons why we historically protect against discrimination based on those characteristics. At the end of the day, the only question that really should be before you with this ordinance is whether or not the LGBT community belongs in that group of people who are protected. I thank you for your yes vote on this ordinance tonight."
Jamie Greer, Montana Human Rights Network said, members of the City Council, thank you so much for your time and your patience. We know there's strong support for this ordinance from the Missoula community, including many of the people here tonight who are here to be proponents and testify before you. I've restrained from discussing my personal history or sharing my own story with what happened to me when I came out to my father as a gay man. I was born and raised in Gallatin County, and I came out pretty young. It might surprise a lot of you to hear about an 8th grader. coming out at Chief Joseph Middle School in Bozeman, Montana, but it did happen. It was me. I met resistance from my peers, my teachers, and others. And I'm not here to share stories of discrimination. What I am here to say is my father's reaction. My father would classify himself as a conservative. He grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and he's a veteran. When he heard his only son was gay, his response was that he was proud of me, that he loved me, and that he was afraid. And I asked him, "Why are you afraid?" And his response was that he knew my life was going to be more difficult as a gay man, that I was going to face discrimination and hardship, and it would always be an uphill battle. And that's why we're here today. That's why our coalition is here today. That's why the people who've supported this ordinance, organizations, and the 3,200 people who have signed these petitions are here today. Thank you so much.
Tay Nash said, "I'm a resident of Missoula. I've lived here all my life. I have 5 children. I own 2 businesses. First, let me say that the anti-discrimination ordinance is purposely constructed to give no recognition to and no exempted protections to rights of conscience. And because of the intended omission of this fundamental protection throughout the language of this ordinance, it sends a very loud and clear message that the real purpose of this ordinance is to force change in the moral composition of this community. This ordinance is not simple. It is massive in its social implications to this community. It is written purposely vague in its definitions. It is confusing. It is oppressive in its legal consequences to our businesses and public economy leaders. And it causes unforeseen problems with the rights to privacy, and most seriously, it encroaches upon the safety protections that are expected by all women and children in this community. Because of the recklessness of this ordinance and the unnecessary overreaching implications that this will put upon Missoula citizens should this pass, let every council member who votes for this ordinance know that there is formed a highly organized community of citizens who have come together like I've never seen or witnessed in my life in this city. And your aspirations of future political service will be severely challenged upon re-election. This ordinance goes against the will of this community. I'll repeat it again. This ordinance goes against the will of this community. Thank you, Mayor.
Bob Lucino said, "This is not easy for me to do tonight, fellow Missoulians, fellow citizens. This is not easy at all. I possibly risk fellow friendships following my words tonight. I don't hate anybody. I much prefer to bring smiles to people's faces than frowns. Anybody that knows me knows that to be true. People who speak in opposition tonight to this ordinance are not hateful people. They are reasonable, thoughtful citizens who care a great deal for our city and for all of our fellow citizens. We respect your office and we pray for you all on a regular basis. We respect your authority. I come tonight as a citizen to state my opposition to the shrewdly crafted ordinance that, in my opinion, has been effectively drafted by out-of-state interests, maybe the ACLU, I'm not sure. I was thinking to myself over the weekend, what is there really to discuss here tonight? A proclamation has been read. What's really to discuss? This proposed anti-discrimination ordinance language, in my opinion, is craftily engineered with an artful sophistry. It seems very cleverly sandwiched in and among noble civil rights images. What the vast majority of Americans and Montana regard as self-destructive, deviant, and dysfunctional behaviors have been cloaked among iconic civil rights images like race, color, creed, and disabled veterans. Who can argue with that? I thought this weekend, would Ralph Abernathy be here tonight? Would Martin Luther King be here? Would JFK? Would LBJ? What would they say? How would they feel? Is it a civil rights issue or not? I don't recall a single statement, at least publicly, by any of these heroes of the civil rights movement that referred to the special interest groups we're talking about tonight, cloaked in these iconic images that bring civil rights memories to all of us. And in conclusion, I'd like the council to take up all the other people and all the other people's needs that are really in danger in this city on a daily basis and not getting tied up in these extraneous moral issues, okay? There's enough room in Zootown for all of us, but I don't think we need to go this far. Thank you very much.
Harris Himes said, "I do not want the epitaph of the city council, and I speak to you in a friendly nature as much as possible on this, that this is the city council that bankrupted the city of Missoula, because it very likely could. And I tell you, for the first time that a gender identity man walks into a women's restroom and does something that strikes physiological fear and apprehension in a child, a lawsuit will come against the city because of this ordinance. And you will know real litigation costs above and beyond the First Amendment things. So I appreciate your time as a pastor and an attorney. Of course, I have much more to say, but thank you very much for your attention, and I beg you to remember also, for the sake of your souls, this is a sin, and you should not support it. Thank you very much."
Caitlin Koppel said, "I'm speaking in support. Some people have expressed doubt about the need for this ordinance, and I'm here to clear that up. Two friends of mine who've given me permission to share their story tried to buy a condo and experienced discrimination. In 2006, my friend called the developer and owner of a to-be-built 8-unit condo and said she and her partner would like to make a deposit on the unit. He said he'd get back to them. He never called. After 2 weeks of waiting, the women were pretty sure he wasn't going to call, and why. Upon closer review of the condo association documents, they discovered discriminatory language. I quote, "No immoral, improper, unlawful, dangerous, or offensive activity shall be carried on in any unit or upon the general or limited common elements, nor shall anything be done which may be or become an annoyance, a nuisance, a safety, or health hazard to the unit owners." They had no legal recourse. This ordinance would change that. What developer would refuse to sell or forgot to call back buyers for a guaranteed sale? What developer would forget about interested buyers when the real estate bubble, particularly for condos, burst in 2008? One who didn't want a lesbian couple living in the building. Thank you.
Frank Chappelle said, "A life resident of the great state of Montana and 20 years of the wonderful city of Missoula, and what an honor to speak before you. 154 years ago, our forefathers started making laws and they haven't quit. For some reason, every time we elect people, they think they have to vote more stuff in. Believe me, the book's getting pretty thick, okay? The people can't afford it. Yeah, we have our problems, they have problems, we have problems. I don't hate anybody. I don't want to hate anybody, and I don't think any of us want to. The way to solve this problem is not by making a special group that gets special rights. Hey, if a room full of Grizz fans can tolerate a Bobcat fan, this isn't a big deal, so why do we need it? Thank you very much for your time."
Bree Sutherland said, "I am a student at the University of Montana majoring in computer science. As an activist heavily involved in the transgender community, a self-identified feminist, and as a lesbian, I have firsthand seen what discrimination feels like. Being a transgender individual myself, I've experienced discrimination of all kinds in every aspect of my life. I have experienced discrimination as both a lesbian and even more as a transgender woman. Discrimination of any kind hurts. It's unacceptable to deny an individual their most basic of human rights on the basis of gender identity or gender expression. As individuals, we deserve every right of those whose physical-born sex is consistent with their gender identity. Missoula is my home. It is my community. I ask everyone of Missoula to come forward and do the right thing in showing your support for this ordinance. Thank you.
Bernadette Neef said, "I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a Missoulian. Imagine you have a job, which is hard to come by these days. You also have a secret to keep. You're part of the LGBT community. You go to bed each night wondering if you'll be found out and fired from your job. Each day at work, you wonder if today is the day. It's not because of anything you did wrong. It's just because of your sexual orientation or gender expression. The stress is enormous. Experienced on a daily basis, this kind of stress leads to a number of mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, panic attacks. There can also be internalized feelings of loneliness, abandonment, desperation. Suicide rates in the LGBT community are higher than in the general population. LGBT kids drop out of school because of bullying and are also at greater risk of suicide than their heterosexual peers. These conditions do not have to play a role in anyone's life. The passage of this ordinance will send a clear message that discrimination will not be tolerated any longer. Some will testify that homosexuality is an abomination. This is a religious belief and not a secular issue. Some say that homosexuality is a choice. Clearly, if it were a choice, one would certainly not choose to be a target of hatred. Is heterosexuality a choice? Does a person change after you find out they are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender? Aren't they the same person they were just a few seconds before you knew who they were? Fear is a great deterrent for living one's life fully. That's all we're asking tonight. The right to live life fully, without fear, fear of losing a job, of being evicted from housing, or just not being hired because of how we are perceived. To finally be part of the freedom and justice for all, I urge you to pass this non-discrimination ordinance, and thank you for your time.
Iris Schmidt said, "Mayor and board of the council and the press, I'm happy to be here today. I want to say that I have no hate in my heart at this time. I can honestly say I feel love and I'm sorry for those who have been hurt. If they have been discriminated of some sort out of maybe their misbehavior, I'm sorry for their behaviors. But, however, I am a mother and a wife. I have a divine calling to be a mother to my children, and my role is to protect my children. I have done a very good job doing that, and it's taken a lot of work. That means shutting off the cable. That means watching the internet and what they're on and monitoring because they can become desensitized. My children are so important to me. My family is a solid unit, and I will fight to protect that. I work at a school, a middle school. I see children acting upon the same sex, and it is not okay. And where are they learning this? Let's ask that question. It is not okay, and I have addressed it to the principal, and I'll tell you, things have got to change, and we have to raise up our standards. Let's do it as a community. Let's take up a higher standard for our families. Let's put the core into families. I'm against the anti-discrimination. I am. I'm a religious person. We have choices, and I choose family as my core. And I wish everybody would choose their family as a core, husband, wife, children raised on principles and standards that are good for our community, that helps our community, that makes strength. We can move mountains with principle and acting on principle. Please, I have no hate. I have no hate, and that's what this is becoming, a hate issue. According to someone who spoke not very long ago, all these community places were supporting the gay gender. Well then, where are they being discriminated if all these public places are for them? Where are they being discriminated? You know, when it comes to values and family, I love my family. I wanted you guys to know that. And I will do what it takes. If it takes shutting off the internet, if it takes describing how the children are demonstrating gay actions, I will describe to my children that it's not appropriate because it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate behavior. And if they're born that way, there is counseling and there is help. If my child was gay, I would love them just as I love all of you in this room.
Bill Waverly said, "You can direct your bricks at my picture window if you'd like, but I'm opposed to this ordinance because it exposes the business community and the churches to lawsuits and fines. There's not a provision in this thing to protect them. It's been back and forth by different speakers here, but I read the thing several times, and I've watched its iterations, and I think you could rewrite this thing so that it would be more acceptable to both sides. I hope you will consider that."
Melinda Gopher said, "I'm a Missoula resident. I've lived here for about 4 years. I'm a practitioner of fair housing over half my life. I'm 45 years old. I've served as a tester initially bringing fair housing law to Montana, and at that time we found that almost 60% of instances that we tested, Native Americans were discriminated against in housing. I went on to serve as an education and outreach coordinator for a nonprofit fair housing group. I've worked as a fair housing specialist for the city of Great Falls, and I was a presenter at the one and only National Fair Housing Summit in our nation's history in 1994, in January. On behalf of my husband and myself and my 4 children, he's a combat veteran, we support this ordinance. The thing is, there's always a good reason to discriminate. There's always a really good reason to discriminate, and that's what laws are for, so that we can have an equal society. I commend you for your bravery on this. Thank you."
Michelle Basher said, "I'm here to oppose the ordinance. I am a Missoula resident, business owner, and mother of 5 children. I do not believe this is an ordinance directly related to the concerns brought about from incidences of our town. If there's been such a problem in our area, why was this ordinance not brought to the attention of residents in a more professional, out-in-the-open approach? Missoula is already a very tolerant place to live. Spend a day downtown or a morning at the farmer's market. We are diverse. We do not need an ordinance or a stated date to prove that fact. If you look at and read the websites of the organizations pushing this ordinance forward, like ACLU of Montana, Montana Human Rights Network, and Forward Montana, this is most definitely part of an agenda. I would like you guys to vote no on this for many reasons. Thank you."
Jeanette Zentgraf said, "I am speaking for 36 women in Concerned Women for America here in Missoula City. You are preparing to pass a draconian city ordinance because of discrimination in the workplace and accommodations here in the city. If Missoula City fits the national pattern, there has been a great exaggeration about discrimination against gays and lesbians in the workplace. Landlords will lose their freedom to control the overt behavior of homosexuals or transgender people in rentals where family people also reside. The classic example of what happens when landlords lose their freedom occurred on Fire Island, New York, 30 years ago. The legislation that was passed allowed a whole 60 miles of the most beautiful waterfront on Long Island to be altered. As the homosexuals rented the facilities, objectivity and discreetness vanished so much that the families were discriminated against. They couldn't stay there with their families."
Patricia Clay said, "I have been a resident of the Missoula area for 11 years. My husband owns a business here. My children attend school within the city limits, and I do all of my business within the city limits. And I wanted to start out by saying that I have had good friends. I have had colleagues and I have had neighbors that were close, next door, across the street, that were members of the lesbian and gay community. And in all of those cases, of all those people that I know, I had not one issue with them. I was able to work with them, be friends with them, live next to them, and not have any problem. But I am opposed to certain parts of this ordinance. I have a 13-year-old daughter that I would feel unsafe for. I just don't really believe that this particular issue is a civil rights issue or discrimination issue. I believe that it is a public safety issue. I think that we need to keep restrooms and facilities like that separate. And if we need to add a third individual, then maybe that would be the way that we should go. I also believe that the issues of the pedophiles and the rapists and the perverts would not probably come from this particular community, but opening the restrooms to men and women would extend the invitation to these people. Thank you very much.
David Herrera said, I live up the Rattlesnake and work as a sole proprietor in downtown Missoula. I worked in public health, specifically in HIV prevention, for over 25 years and conducted civil rights work for even longer. I am here to urge you to support the ordinance to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression in Missoula's non-discrimination policy as it pertains to housing, employment, and public accommodations. As a Latino gay man, and for the record, I don't differentiate between the two, my sexual orientation was no more choice than my ethnicity. That's my experience. As a Latino gay man, for the past 2 days, I've been compared to rapists, pedophiles, and adulterers. I truly hope the council members are able to see the truth about who we are as gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered individuals. We are your sons and daughters, aunts and uncles, mothers and fathers, doctors and lawyers, legislators, artists and business owners, students and retired persons. We are Latino, Native American, of European descent, Asian, and of all other ethnicities. We are Catholic, Christian, Muslim, agnostic, Jewish, and of all religious faiths. We are even Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, and Independent. We are homeless and housed, rich and poor, young and old. We worry about taxes, health care, paying our monthly bills, and caring for our families. In short, we are much like anyone else. If you have family or friends that are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered, then you probably already know this. I believe that we should be judged based on our merit, character, integrity, and abilities, not based on who we love. This ordinance is about fairness and equality. It says that we really believe the American promise that everyone should have the fair chance to be everything that they possibly can be, that they can go as far as their intellect, determination, and creativity can take them. Please vote to help us achieve that promise for all Missoulians. Thank you.
Lily Wilson and Sandra Nett said, we represent the Women's Resource Center as a group dedicated to promoting feminist and gender issues. The Women's Resource Center considers itself a strong ally of the LGBTQI community, not only because many of our members can identify with at least one of the letters of LGBTQI, including myself, but also for the same reason that supporters of the suffrage tended to be supporters of the abolition, and vice versa. Because we consider ourselves feminists, it's natural that we consider ourselves advocates on behalf of all marginalized groups. The LGBTQI community is patently a marginalized group, and we fully support ending discrimination against them. Because we are a women's group, we think it's necessary to share a few words regarding our status as women, for it seems as though those opposing this anti-discrimination bill are concerned mostly with our safety. The Women's Resource Center fully supports the passing of this ordinance and does not foresee it causing any harm to women. To the contrary, we foresee it sending the message that all women, including trans, lesbian, bisexual, and queer women, have intrinsic dignity, and rights.
Taryn Nash said, I'm a Missoula native, and I'm currently in Spokane right now attending physician assistance school, but I'll be coming back in 3 months. I'm also T. Nash's daughter. T. Nash, if you don't know already, is the chairman of the NotMyBathroom.com. I'm also a member of the LGBT community, and I'm here for 2 very important reasons tonight, and I appreciate you listening to my short statements. The first is to address my father. He just left. I don't know if you saw that, but because of my presence, I believe he left. Dad, I strongly disagree with the way you've been portraying the LGBT community, who are my friends. You have gone too far. I will not sit back any longer and be quiet. I love you because you're my dad, but I've lost respect for you. Your blanket judgments and irrational conclusions are ignorant, hurtful, and you need to realize this crusade you're on is wrong, and it affects me personally. It makes me sad to say this, but Dad, right now I'm ashamed to call you my father. I'm asking you to stop your ridiculous agenda of battling LGBT rights, or you will lose me forever. The second reason I'm here tonight is to encourage the council members to pass this very important ordinance. I plan to practice medicine with an emphasis in geriatric care in the Missoula community, and I hope to live in a community where I won't be discriminated against based on my orientation. I also encourage you to pass this ordinance because these wonderful people of the LGBT community deserve protection against discrimination in all areas. They're hardworking, trustworthy, loving, and respectable people, and I'm proud to call them my family. Thank you for your time.
Marilyn McIntyre said, I'm a native Montanan, 55 years, so I suspect I may be one of the few native Montanans here. I'm not sure. I would suggest to the other side that I am a member of the NRA. I like to kill and eat animals. That might offend a lot of you, and you would have that right to be personally offended. You have the right to make that choice, and if you had a rental property and you chose not to rent to me because I'm hanging my dead animals around and carrying my guns in and out of your property, you might decide that because of ideological reasons that you're on one side and I'm on the other. Maybe you wouldn't want to rent to me. You might feel threatened. You have that right. I have nothing against the gay and lesbian community. I think we all have choices. We're all able to make those choices. This is a moral issue to me. And I say to you, and I mean it, if I carried a sign up there and I said, shame on you, Mayor Engen, and I say shame on us if we pass this. I am adamantly opposed to this. All of you, thank you.
Diane Kiefhofer said, in November of 2007, Kmart in Missoula hired me to be a stalker. There were 2 other stalkers that were also hired that week, and we had the same experience. We had the same job, same work, same pay. Roxanne was my trainer and supervisor. We worked side by side 7 to 9 hours a day, and we chatted about her family, the prices, the weather, and got along real well. 2 weeks later, in the back room, the guys were joking about being gay or something, and I said, hey, keep it clean, guys, I'm gay. And they kind of laughed uneasily. After that, everything changed. I was buzzed in at 3 a.m. each morning when I got there, but someone had to come and let me in, unlock the door. No one, when I buzzed on that morning, no one came for me for like 15, 20 minutes. And I was late punching in and got reprimanded for that too. When I saw Roxanne, I asked her where the toilet brushes went, and she kind of looked at me, but she didn't. She looked right through me, like I wasn't even there. She didn't say anything to me at all, but I could feel her hostility. The store manager later that day called me in and said, you are mandated to stock 50 boxes in an hour for every hour you work, or you will be fired. Neither of the other 2 stalkers were told this. No one else was given that mandate for their new job. A week later, the manager called me in again and said, you didn't meet that fixed 50 bucks an hour requirement, and you're always late, so you're being let go. I was astounded. I worked hard. I worked real hard, and I was fired for being gay. It wasn't right. That day, I went over to the Mansfield Library and got onto one of the websites there and filed a claim with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It's a federal commission. The closest offices are in Seattle. A week later, I heard from a representative of the EEOC. She made sure I was the person who filed the report and that I lived in Montana. I said yes, and she says, "In Montana, you are not protected from discrimination. There's nothing we can do." I'm sorry. I wanted to cry. This is the United States of America, and it's not right.
Todd Zimmerman said, "I come before you tonight as a resident of Missoula, a family, a father of 3 lovely children and a wife. I also come before you as a businessman in Missoula, opening a business here 4 years ago. I currently have a business here in your lovely city. You know, last I've seen, sexual predators didn't wear a tattooed stamp on their forehead that said, 'That's what I am.' If they have a transsexual moment going to a bathroom and we have a woman, a child in there, even if they only have an emotional or physical breakdown over it, the lawsuits, the ramification of that is going to come before this city, and this city is going to have to fight that in the court of law. They're going to have to pay an attorney to fight this. I just ask that you either table this or vote against it on that basis only."
John Blake said, "I'm gay and I'm from Montana. I'm also a Missoula resident. As you can see, I'm also an African-American man. I have stood here for hours and heard statements in relation to racial issues that make very clear that race is not finished here. I hope that you will support this ordinance. I don't know what more I can say except that I've never been so scared to state who I was and what I needed. I hope Missoulians will think about that. Thank you."
Emmett said, "Very briefly, thank you for your patience. I've never spoken to this body before, but my name is Emmett. I've lived here in Missoula for 24 years. After prayer and consideration, just briefly, I am against this ordinance on constitutional grounds. I have never had neighbors who are gay and lesbian. I have had neighbors who are gay and lesbian in my old apartment. I've drunk wine with them. I've debated about their lifestyle. I am not here to debate the homosexual lifestyle. I am opposed to it. It has nothing to do with this. If someone was forced to hire a homosexual, forced to rent to them, that would be unconstitutional. I am a punk rocker, and yes, I have been nearly murdered for being a punk rocker, and I've been discriminated against. The police officers who handled the case and the attorneys did an excellent job at bringing the perpetuator to justice, and there is no ordinance protecting the punk rock community. But I believe that there have been protections already in place to protect those who have been gay bashed or any such thing. I thank you for your time, and God bless the United States of America. This has been exciting."
Jennifer Swede said, "I'm terrified to speak here tonight, but I have to. I go to work every day. I do the best job I can. I pay my rent every month, and unfortunately, in my case, that isn't enough. That can change at the whim of somebody because I'm a transsexual woman. I'm a Missoula resident and a lifelong Montanan."
Gordon Dexter said, "I thank you for the opportunity of speaking. I share concerns for all of them when I speak of the anti-discrimination ordinance. I'm opposed to discrimination. I'm opposed to brick throwing. I'm opposed to name calling. I'm opposed to cross burning. But I am vehemently opposed to this ordinance. As written, this ordinance will create reverse discrimination. I am opposed to this. I represent a congregation that opposes it. As a PAT member of the Montana Regular Baptist Fellowship Association, I represent the feelings of over 15 churches in western Montana who are watching Missoula to see what they will do. They are, to all men, opposed to it. I think you're getting in over your heads. I would ask that you vote against it or at least put the vote of the people who live in Missoula. Thank you for your consideration.
Mary Nordhagen said, I am currently the chair of the Unitarian Universal Fellowship of Missoula. We are lay-led, so we have no professional minister to speak eloquently for us or to argue theology. For me, speaking in public is more than a bit of a stretch, let alone waiting for hours to do so. But this is too big of an issue for us to remain silent, too important an issue not to make a public stand. Many of you here probably don't even know what Unitarian Universal is or what we stand for. We have a long history and a proud tradition of working for religious freedom, working for inclusion, for tolerance, and celebrating diversity. The Missoula City Council cannot legislate a hate-free Missoula. People are free to believe as they wish. However, this council can send a strong message about what behavior is intolerable and will not be allowed in this city. The Unitarian Universal Fellowship of Missoula supports this amendment, and we encourage each member of the council to vote in favor. Thank you.
Kelly Hersman said, I am a native Missoulian and I'm a city resident now. I oppose this and I oppose those of you who are going for this, and my vote will count. I ask that you please vote no on this, and I thank all of you tonight who on religious and moral grounds has stated everything that I've wanted to say. So I'll keep it short. Thank you.
Doug Smith said, as a Missoula native and Missoula businessman, I'd like to share quickly a couple of observations I've had tonight. Number one, that's the most polite line I've ever stood in. And number two, you guys have buns of steel. I don't know how you do it. This is incredible, but I'll be quick. Local business is already economically burdened to the point that going out of business signs can be seen on store windows all over Missoula. Adding this proposed ordinance to the cost of doing business in Missoula may result in Missoula businesses moving to other locales where communities do not confuse citizens' moral value judgments with bigotry. I respectfully urge this body to defeat the proposed ordinance, or actually to return the proposed ordinance to committee just to address the unintended consequences the proposed ordinance will impose on Missoula businesses. Thank you very much. You're all wonderful.
Carl Williams said, I am opposed to this amendment. Sorry. Everyone has said a lot of great things. But what I look at is that of 3 to 5% of the population. Approximately 30% of them are discriminated against. And you're asking 100% of us to bear that in another city ordinance on the backs of small businesses or large businesses. Thank you.
Dave Burkhoff said, I'm a resident of the Rattlesnake. I've lived in Missoula for 17 years. I think the opponents of this ordinance have spoken for me and shown me that bigotry is alive and well in Montana. I encourage you to pass this proposed ordinance, and if there are any lawsuits out there, I will use my pro bono attorney services for you in defending this ordinance. Thank you.
Emily May said, I live on California Street, and I am currently serving as the vice president of the Associated Students of the University of Montana. I'm here representing approximately 14,000 students whose representative body has recently chosen to support this ordinance. We don't all vote here, but most of us do live here. We've prioritized civil rights issues in the past. I think the body will choose to do so in the future. I hope you consider that when you are deliberating. Thank you.
Mark Angelik said, I'm wearing two hats tonight. One is the president of the Missoula Area Central Labor Council, and also as the executive officer of the United Union Local 427, which is a union of hospitality workers, low-wage workers in Montana. And both organizations have unanimously and actually very enthusiastically voted to endorse this resolution, this amendment. In fact, the biggest response we had was, quote, "It's about time." This is a good step forward. It is something that needs to go further as well. It does not cover domestic partners, and that's something that can be definitely addressed later on. One last thing is that this will be an economic good for Missoula. I think you underestimate the economic power of people when they feel welcome to come to Missoula, to visit here, to have a convention here, to spend their money here. That is not to be underestimated. The time to pass this is now. Thank you.
Sadie Oliver said, I'm here to speak in support of the ordinance. Throughout my high school career, I've received 15 notes in my locker calling me words and names that are not allowed in this room. I've been pushed against lockers, and I've once received a note that had my address written on it and a threat against my life. I'm 17 years old, and I've received 2 threats against my life due to being a lesbian. But the thing is, I'm not a lesbian. My point is this. This ordinance does not only protect LGBT people, it protects heterosexual people as well. People, any girl that has short hair, any guy that has long hair, any girl that doesn't want to wear a dress, or anyone that is perceived as homosexual, even though they're straight, but they're mistreated because of it. This ordinance isn't right simply because it protects the gay community. It protects people. And I don't see how religion or discomfort with a sexual practice different from yours, or having a problem with someone wearing a dress when you think they should wear pants, comes into this equation in any way, shape, or form. And I hope that you pass this ordinance, because if not, I'll feel that this council has failed.
Neil Armstrong said, I do understand what it's like because I waited for hours and have also served on the city commission for a couple of years, so I understand how you guys feel being stuck there as long as you have. But this is Jeanette Rankin's town. This is Mike Mansfield's town. Both of them struggled for long periods to make the society a little more open, a little more understanding, and responsive to everyone. We have a chance for a historic vote here. I really urge you to vote yes. We have been through a long night together. We have seen an awful lot of community spirit on both sides of the issue. But we too need to protect and care for all our members. It's that simple. This is the most clearly written ordinance I've ever seen. It does protect gay and lesbian rights, but more to the point, it protects the rights of all Missoulians, all Montanans, more clearly than any other document I've ever seen other than the Montana State Constitution. Thank you.
James Verlanik said, okay, I'm here to voice my opposition to this ordinance. Many prior speakers before me have said that this is much too important of an issue to be voted on by just a handful of people. Representative government was designed when people were far away from their legislators. Now our constituents are right here. It's important as this is, this ordinance should be voted on by the people, because this government is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not just a few. Anyway, thank you.
Margot Hart said, I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor, and I'm a licensed counselor, and I'm opposed to this, not because I want to discriminate. I've listened for 25 years to stories and I've counseled people, lesbian, gay, transsexual, that have been raped, that have been molested. I just can't tell you the stories I've heard, and I have a real concern. I just think the language is way off. I think we're opening a door. We're getting raped and molested and stolen and left in ditches. I'm not trying to mark a predator thing, but I'm just saying, hey, wake up, protect everybody, and write it so we really know what we're doing. Thank you.
Spider McKnight said, I'm a resident of Missoula. I own a business downtown Missoula. And I just want to say that I recognize that you are all very tired. I'm very tired, but I want to talk about a bigger context of being tired. I think a lot of us here feel tired in a different way. Tired, for me personally, tired of being called names, tired of being chased, tired of having my friends' houses burned down, all because they're gay or lesbian, tired of being beaten myself, tired of having to come to meetings like this, tired of being told I'm a sexual deviant, tired of being told that you don't hate me but that you don't want me to have my rights, tired of being told you don't discriminate against me and yet I shouldn't go into a bathroom or a sauna. Mostly, I'm tired of having to stand here even though I'm a business owner, I'm a homeowner, I sit on boards, I employ people, I volunteer, I donate money, I give pro bono, but I have to stand here in front of you and say, please don't discriminate against me. What more do I have to do? What more do any of us have to do, to say? Just give us what we already should have, that's all. Thank you for your support.
Dave Holly said, I'm a Missoula resident, and I had an employer a number of years back drive by my house and see a car parked at my house with a gay sticker on it. He told me later and asked me whether I was gay. He told me if I were, he would fire me. I needed the job. I lied. Be nice to know I wouldn't have to. Thanks.
Jamie Branson said, I have a wife and 5 children. I live here in Missoula. Lived here for 15 years or so. I come before you in representation of what you would call an average family. Our kids do sports, they go to youth church, we go to church, we go to Grizz games, we buy food, we just do all the normal stuff. We can't grow a garden, but we can do a lot of other things. For me, from my Christian values, I can't get past the part about love your neighbor. I do love my neighbors, and it doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter who they are and what they represent. That's my approach. So I am in opposition of this ordinance. But I want to say that's really hard because I do love my neighbors, and I believe that we're all neighbors. I have to be in opposition because I've got a duty to raise my family in the way that I believe, and that's how I believe. All that said, fine line. Thank you.
Amy Capilupo said, I'm gay. I've always been gay. My whole life I've been gay. I mean, I've always known I was gay. I've been gay since I was 8. I'm just gay. I'm like the gayest person I know. I mean, I'm really serious about this, okay? Like, I mean, I don't mean to make you laugh. I'm totally serious. And when I came out to my parents, they didn't take it very well. They took it terribly, in fact. And over time and therapy and years, my father finally came to me with the reason. He said, because I was afraid. I was afraid that you'd get beat up, that you wouldn't be able to be all these things in life that I wanted you to be. And today, you guys have the opportunity to kind of hopefully help whoever is younger, just like me, who is just gay. I mean, totally gay, okay? I mean, God made me gay. And whoever here does not think that God made me gay for 5 seconds, I assure you, God made me gay. Amy Capilupo, gay.
Mayor Engen said, thank you. Any additional comment on a motion to amend? Seeing none and no discussion, we'll have a voice vote on the motion to amend.
Martha Rabine, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, sorry, city clerk said, Alderwoman Rye made a motion to adopt Ordinance 3428 of the Missoula City Council. Upon a roll call vote, the vote on Ordinance 3428 was as follows. Ordinance 3428 carried 10 ayes, 2 nays, 0 abstain, 0 absent. The ordinance was approved. The meeting was adjourned at 1:47 a.m.
We're going to take a brief pause to reset the stage, and then we will have an interactive panel discussion facilitated by Caitlin Koppel.
Everybody so much for coming tonight, for being here. I just want to give another round of applause to Heidi at NCBI and her amazing staff and board. It's such a magical thing to be back together and see, how many people are here again 3 years later, and how much has changed just in our country and in our state, since even in those 3 years. So it's a really touching thing to be a part of. So I'm glad to be facilitating this awesome panel. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce them. We'll start with Nikki. Nikki Zupanik is the Public Policy Director of the ACLU of Montana. Nikki advances the agenda. There is an agenda of the ACLU before the state legislature and executive branch by developing and implementing strategies to defeat legislation that jeopardizes civil liberties and to promote policies that protect and expand our constitutional rights. She presents a variety of public education events for ACLU members, community groups, and the general public on topics related to personal liberty, privacy, and autonomy. Prior to joining the ACLU, she served for 6 years as a policy committee consultant and legislative aide for the California State Assembly, and she holds a JD, that's a law degree, from the University of the Pacific, McGeorge School of Law. Yes, so welcome, Nikki. And she'll do great because her boss is here too, so thanks for coming, Scott. The director of the ACLU is here too. Okay, and then we have Dave Strohmeyer, who is my awesome colleague on the City Council, and a professional historian, nature writer, and a former firefighter with the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. He has served 2 terms, that's 8 years, folks, on the Missoula City Council. Whew, that's a long time. And he co-sponsored Missoula's non-discrimination ordinance. In 2012, he ran for the U.S. House of Representatives, and part of his campaign ran the first marriage equality TV ad in Montana history. Stacy Rye is awesome, and she's a former city councilwoman from Ward 3 and a co-sponsor, and the former director of WORD, Women's Opportunity and Resource. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm messing it up. Word to Stacy. Thanks for being here. Stacia Hill is a big. Yay, Stacia. She is a Big Sky High School senior, and she's been involved with NCBI and Youth Forward for almost 4 years and has participated in every single Diversity Day celebration. And not only that, outside of NCBI, she is involved in scientific research. And she's an editor for the Literary Arts magazine at Big Sky, so like both sides of her brain work, which is awesome. And next year, she's going to go to school at UM and continue leading NCBI trainings in the community. And the lovely Bobby Zanker is she is a disability and civil rights attorney in Helena and the first and only transgender attorney in Montana history who's open, yes. And probably the only one, though. And she is an LGBT photographer and advocate and has served on the Montana Human Rights Network and Montana Pride Network board. She is a current member of Pride Foundation's Montana Leadership Action Team, and she is the author of Trans Montana, a memoir of transformation in body, mind, and spirit. And she spends a lot of time trying to sell books and spread her message that everybody matters and we are changing the world. Yes, thanks to people like you, Bobby. And my friend Jamie Greer was born and raised in Bozeman, and he has worked for the Montana Human Rights Network since the 2009 legislative session. He was the lead organizer on the campaign to pass Montana's first LGBT non-discrimination ordinance here in Missoula, and is currently leading the campaign to pass similar ordinances. Well, Helena passed, yay! And and now laying the groundwork in other communities around the state, which we'll talk about. He lobbies for the Montana Human Rights Network and works on policy related to social and economic justice, including reproductive freedom, LGBT equality, immigrant rights, and access to health care. Expansion of Medicaid, going once, going twice, okay. And he previously worked as an HIV/AIDS tester and counselor with the Montana Gay Men's Task Force here in Missoula, and volunteered with me and others at the Western Montana Gay and Lesbian Community Center way back in the day. So, yay, thanks for being here. They're an impressive bunch. So we are going to I'm going to ask them a couple of questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. And if y'all are shy, then I'll ask more questions, but hopefully you won't be. So if we'll just start by asking each of you to share quickly, keeping time in mind, your role and involvement in passing the non-discrimination ordinance. And those of you that were or are on council, just talk about how the ordinance came to the council from your perspective. And we'll start with Nikki.
So my role was to play the out-of-state boogeyman who wrote that horrible language. My role, the ACLU of Montana, was approached by the Montana Human Rights Network and asked if we would be interested in doing some legal research and some drafting, because there were folks in Missoula who were interested in bringing an ordinance, but there had yet to be one introduced anywhere in the state of Montana. And we wanted to be a resource for the drafting, the policy analysis, and all the legalese, all the fun stuff. So I was the writer.
So I'll just say that change is possible. 8 years ago, when I started on the Missoula City Council, I can recall a conversation I had with someone early on who probed the idea with me of maybe it's time that Missoula adopts something like a non-discrimination ordinance. He or she, I can't remember who it was at the time, but did not describe it precisely in those terms, but that's what they were getting at. And at the time, I had some questions in my own mind as far as, is there already a law, an ordinance on the book that covers this sort of thing? But over time, over the years, it became clear to me from hearing from community members, my constituents, friends, that discrimination indeed was alive and well in the city of Missoula, and that it was time that we did something like this in our community. And after hearing that the city of Salt Lake City had adopted something like a non-discrimination ordinance, I couldn't help but think, my God, if Salt Lake City can do this, certainly Missoula, Montana can. So it was at that point I began thinking seriously and fishing around about what other cities had adopted ordinances like this and what we could do here locally. I found out that at the same time that I was thinking about this, there were other folks also considering this, including my colleague at the time, Stacy Rye, the ACLU, Montana Human Rights Network. So it was really a synergy of effort that came together, and a team effort to adopt this ordinance. None of us could have done it individually, and I am very proud of the city of Missoula and all those who collaborated in the effort. I
had a conversation with Jamie Greer, and another person whose name I cannot remember, Kim Abbott, about this and did some research on my own. And of course, it made sense, I think, to do this in Missoula, to do this in Missoula first. However, I did think that that it just would not have been a big deal, that it would have been really just an administrative matter. And I remember having a conversation with Dave. I chaired the committee that this was in, Administration and Finance, and I remember having a conversation with like Dave, and it was almost offhand. It was like, well, okay, so then we're going to do like buy a truck and a lawnmower, and then we're going to, okay, this non-discrimination, and we need to fix this because that's not there for sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, and then we need to clean up something. And it was just almost as if it was an administrative kind of thing, and didn't know that it was going to kind of turn into what it did. I do have to say, though, that there were steps prior to this that the county, Missoula County took, and that the city of Missoula took, that were kind of like baby steps, that were starting to kind of set the stage for this to sort of happen in Missoula. Missoula County, much to their credit that they don't get, did open their health insurance benefits to domestic partners, regardless of sexual orientation or gender. And they did that before there was any lawsuit or anything else. They just did it administratively. And the city of Missoula did that in 2005, I think. And that I just have to say as an aside, Heidi Kendall and I really pushed for that. And we were told by Human Resources that it was illegal, that federal tax law wouldn't allow it. I mean, we were just given the runaround. And who can take on federal tax law? Not Missoula City Council people. And so, you know, we kind of let it drop for about a year, and then we found a way to do it. And so we did it, and it was just not, it just kind of flew under the radar, and it wasn't talked about. But there were steps prior to this happening as well that kind of set the stage for something like it.
So I get to speak from a slightly different perspective. I was only 15 years old when this ordination passed in Missoula, but I participated in the first Diversity Day. I wasn't actually part of the NCBI organization yet, but I had gone through a training in my high school, and I participated in Diversity Day as part of my school's Students for Social, Economic, and Environmental Justice group. And we made posters and participated in the March Up Higgins. And I think I'm going to speak more on how the ordination impacted me as a 15-year-old before I really was immersed in the world of law and adult things. And so really, it was the first exposure I had to these kind of things, and I was shocked to find out that LGBTQ people didn't have protection in housing and the workplace across the country. And that's something I think that people might, not remember, is that as we're raising young people in our community, that we need to make sure that they're aware of exactly what the laws are governing the members of the community, and just make sure that even though they're young, they're not able to vote yet, and they're not really involved in politics, that they still have an idea of what's going on so that they can be an active participant in these types of events.
Thanks for that. That's a great perspective. Bobby?
Well, excuse me. Well, I'm not really sure what my role was, but I was invited.
How'd you get roped in?
This guy, who was one of my fellow super queeros. But, I started... I used to be a county attorney, and I was used to kind of making public appearances and speaking and doing those sorts of things. And then when I transitioned, I worked for the Appellate Defender's Office in a cubicle with no windows and no access to the outside world except through my computer. And I thought, that's okay. This is good. I don't have to be out there all the time. And then all of a sudden, we got called to testify at a hearing in Bozeman. And I went and felt compelled to do it. And I was telling the group earlier today, I got my picture in the paper, as a result of that, and I had it in the Bozeman Comical many times before that, but never as a woman. So no more file photos for me, thank you very much. But anyways, this picture was this evangelical fundamentalist type was standing at the podium with a very tense look on her face and testifying, and I was standing behind her, with my arms crossed and my head up to the ceiling like this, looking very angelic. And that's what I got for my efforts as an activist. So Jamie asked me to come over here and testify, and I did. But I think the most poignant part of that whole week was the time I got to spend on a panel that I think the YMCA and maybe NCBI were involved in sponsoring. And I got to do a radio show with Shani Weiss. And the overwhelming experience in that microcosm of community, of acceptance, of support, what some people might call love, was just fantastic. So thus launched my career as an activist.
And we're glad you did. And Jamie, we kind of know what you did, but if you want to add anything, then I'll go to the next one.
So our role in the ordinance campaign here in Missoula, we had been working since 1991 on passing statewide non-discrimination protection at the legislative level and coming up against significant roadblocks in what we call the killing fields of judiciary committees. And in 2008, we commissioned a poll that found that it was of Montanans' attitudes towards LGBT issues broadly, so relationships, discrimination, hate crimes, and found out that 7 in 10 Montanans agreed that nobody should be fired or denied employment because they're LGBT, and realized that there was a significant difference between who was representing us in Helena and the way most Montanans felt. And so we, at Pride in Kalispell in 2009, did a vote. Folks were able to vote on what community they wanted to see come first with a non-discrimination ordinance, and Missoula was overwhelmingly the #1 result. And that, coupled with a pretty strong queer community locally and a really good base of our activists, members of the Montana Human Rights Network, we moved forward with an ordinance. And I guess that's it.
Awesome. Thanks for that context. So what are some of the lessons that you feel like you learned from this process? And I know the answers might be different since we're all kind of coming at these differently. What did you learn maybe about yourself or about your role as an elected official? And I think for Jamie and maybe Nikki and Bobby, how can some of those or what are the takeaways, I guess, for other communities as the ordinance campaign moves forward? So do you want to start, Stacy?
I think I can't speak for other council people because that's probably physically dangerous. But I would say that I just didn't think that I had a whole lot left to learn. I thought that the intersection between being a feminist and understanding what the discrimination based on gender and discrimination based on sexual orientation had so many intersections and could probably be so familiar as a perspective of life that I just didn't think I had a whole lot left to learn. And you can't cry if you squeeze your butt cheeks. Did you know that?
That's on MCAT, folks.
So I think what we heard from a couple of people who gave testimony was kind of remarkable. And of course, one of those people was Taryn Nash. And after Taryn spoke, there was not a dry eye in that house. I mean, nobody even wanted to get up and speak after Taryn spoke because it was kind of so moving. And I've sat through, I don't know, thousands of hours of public hearings, and that was just a really remarkable way for me to experience kind of a different perspective and put on different glasses for about 5 hours to experience life for why this was needed that I had never experienced before, and suddenly realized that being straight meant something different for me than it meant for a lot of other people. And so that was a remarkable kind of experience for me. And I've had conversations with other city council members in other cities, and Helena did pass a non-discrimination ordinance, but the experience, I think, from looking at it from afar was quite different than Missoula's experience. They did not avail themselves to the tool that is a public hearing to be able to kind of have that experience. And so they didn't get the same experience. And I actually had a Helena City Council member come up to me at a Montana League of Cities and Towns conference and say, well, yeah, we'll do it, but I just, was it needed? Was it really? And so can you just tell me about that? And so, being able to express to him why it was needed and be able to say, that public hearing changed, I think, a lot of perspectives in that room, including my own. And I hope that you have that same experience. And of course they didn't, but that was kind of the remarkable thing for me. And I think every city now looking at it probably has to do it differently for whatever reason. And I think that also we probably should, I shouldn't say should, but there is probably a way to ask folks how it is that they would see something like this passing in their community. It would sure be nice if there was like a condensed version of this reading, or the way it happens, I think, is very moving. And so it would be nice for city council members in other places to be able to avail themselves to see what it is that they could learn from that. The other thing is that there was hundreds maybe of email that went between Nikki, Dave, me, and Jim Nugent, who is here. And it, there was quite a bit of stress, I think, about were we doing this right, and would it pass legal everything according to Montana, this, that, and the other thing. And, on behalf of Dave and I and the shrinking percentage of Americans who haven't been to law school, it was something to kind of keep up with kind of this discussion behind it and try to keep us grounded for the reasons of why it is that we were doing it in the first place. And so having both of those perspectives, I think the legal aspect of what the ACLU does was really interesting to me. And you guys do amazing work and nobody knows about it. And then between them and the city attorney, and then having my perspective of being just a politician was, I thought, moving.
Thank you, Stacy. Dave, did you want to share
Sure.
anything that you learned?
And before I forget, thanks so much, Greg and Ashley and NCBI for bringing this to us tonight. This was an amazing event. I had not seen this footage or heard this testimony for about 3 years now, since the very public hearing you watched tonight. So it was amazing to relive it in a packed audience, which is very reminiscent of what you saw on the screen there tonight and what we experienced there in that room 3 years ago today. What did I learn? So much. I guess first off, I would say I learned that following passage of this ordinance. The sky did not fall in Missoula. What might have been portrayed as Sodom and Gomorrah, I do not think has come to pass. When people who live here or who visit here depart Missoula and look in their rearview mirror, they do not turn into a pillar of salt. This is an open, welcoming community. If you've noticed, businesses are thriving in downtown Missoula because we all know what else says good business like we're bigoted and want to discriminate against you. We've demonstrated that Missoula is the open place that I think we all know in our hearts that it is. I learned so much in terms of the testimony, that some of the snippets you heard tonight, from viewpoints that I really had not experienced personally. I'm proud that the City Council and Stacy and everyone who worked on this decided to stay the course and make sure that this ordinance included the letter T. It was not just an LGB ordinance, it was an LGBT ordinance. Whether Bobby or others who could speak to the experience, the lived experience of the trans community, I think that testimony that evening was some of the most powerful I had ever heard. And on the opposite side, if there was any doubt, and there was no doubt in my mind, but if there was any doubt in any of my colleagues' mind as far as why an ordinance like this should be adopted, I think the testimony of those who were opposed to the ordinance should have demonstrated that, yes, an ordinance like this was indeed necessary. Some of those opponents who you heard tonight, and many more who we heard on that evening, who were speaking from a very conservative evangelical religious perspective, which I should say, I grew out of that experience myself, so I have some understanding of where people are coming from there. But what was so encouraging, and another thing that I learned, was that there was an equal force of folks and people of faith who developed the Flush the Fear website to counter the website that was notmybathroom.com, that there were people of faith out here that stood up for human rights and civil rights and stood alongside of us in this struggle. So those are just a few of many things that I learned, and I look forward to hearing from some others here.
And people of faith are going to play a key role as it moves into other communities as well. So I wonder if Jamie and Nikki could quickly touch on some of the takeaways that you're applying to future communities. And then we'll go to the audience.
I will say there's two things that, so I heard somebody touch upon in their testimony, and it was Spider McKnight, and when Spider's name was read, I put my hand on my heart and made a sound, and so did Nikki. That was amazing testimony. Saying that people are tired, we're tired of being called deviants, and this week the Montana legislature finally voted to remove that language. This has been a long time coming. It's been something that people have been working on since 1989. And so hearing, and actually, frankly, people have been working much longer than that. I mean, the discussions do go back to like the Constitutional Convention and further beyond. It was really powerful for me to hear that in testimony. I will never forget being in the basement of the UCC with Pastor Amy Carter. Is Amy here? Pastor Carter, we had convened a meeting of faith leaders in the Missoula community. We didn't lead with the faith community in terms of our organizing effort. And it was, largely a reaction to a very hostile and negative pushback from the Not My Bathroom crowd. And it's been amazing to think about that day when multiple people from an area church came to intimidate the faith leaders who had gathered for a peaceful meeting to talk about how they can have a good response and flush the fear. And they sat around us with their arms crossed. These were big men, like my size. And Amy Carter told them, "You are not welcome to be here if you're not a supporter. This meeting is for supporters only. You have business?" And they left. It was one of the most amazing moments of any campaign or anything I've ever worked on. We learned a pretty valuable lesson from that. And in Helena, the faith community led. We had the faith community speak at our kickoff. There was an op-ed that ran 2 days after our campaign kickoff. We had multiple events at churches. St. Paul's Methodist Church in Helena was a huge supporter and an amazing supporter. And we're already seeing the faith community step up in ways that it makes me emotional in my hometown in Bozeman, where we're moving next. That's one lesson for sure. Nikki?
So the lesson that I learned, and it was proven again this week, is that we are winning, and we're going to keep winning. This is only going in one direction. There were a lot of things that we did not know about this campaign when we started. None of us up here, none of you, no one in Missoula really knew exactly how this was going to work. But the lesson that I learned is, if you build it, they will come. If you write it, if you introduce it, if you organize around it, if you speak truth to power, it will come. People will show up. People want to be supportive. People want to be fair. People want to be on the right side of history. And it's not something that you get to do in your normal daily life, talking to your coworker and start talking about the importance of a non-discrimination ordinance. But if you have people in the community who are willing to make this a priority, and you have brave elected officials who are willing to make it a priority for their service on the city council, and you have advocates who are willing to put in time and to help organize and give people the tools that they need to testify, to write letters to the editor, to have their voices be heard, they will come, and it will happen. It was really positive to see what we didn't know could happen in Missoula. It went even better than I think we could have imagined, just the response from the community and the sense of ownership that the community felt afterwards. The ordinance was challenged just a few months later in the state legislature, and people from Missoula drove over McDonald Pass twice in the dead of the winter to be able to defend this ordinance that had meant so much to them. So I was really heartened to know that that the community will respond. People will respond and they'll come out, and it'll be incredibly powerful, more powerful than you can even imagine.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'd love to move to some questions from the audience. So I don't know what the best, is there a mic floating around, or should I have someone come up here maybe? Or yell, it's up to you. Okay. So come up or yell, it's your choice. Maybe raise your hand so I can know what you're doing. Questions for either particular participant or all of them? Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm really bad with names. I'd like to hear from the high school student about the atmosphere in Missoula high schools now, and also if there's been any change during the time you've been in high school. Both my kids are in college now, so
Yeah, so it's a little bit difficult for me to say because I've been in high school and I've been experiencing the changes of going from maybe my freshman or sophomore year in high school to your senior year in high school. And as a lot of you probably remember, it's kind of a time of great change. And so people change a lot individually. But I think that the overall climate in Missoula high schools has become a lot more inviting and a lot more open and accepting to LGBTQ issues, at least in my personal experiences with those that I interact with and with those people that I've communicated with. We have a diversity week in our high school, and this year, unfortunately, we didn't have this, but every year we have an LGBTQ panel from the community, which usually consists of young people and older community members from all walks of life, and we usually have a full attendance, so the little area that we facilitate the panel and is packed full, and we have like the maximum number of teachers sign their classes up. We've never had any hateful comments in that atmosphere. So from what I can see, it's generally a pretty accepting place. I mean, things happen. Of course, bullying happens, names happen, but we have a lot of faculty and staff who are ready to step in and interrupt that, and then those who aren't, we just hope that they take in students' best interests in mind and, and protect their students, make sure that their students are safe no matter what their personal beliefs might be. So I think overall it's pretty good.
Great, thanks, Stacia. Other questions from the audience? Aaron.
This is primarily for Bobby, but the concept of ordinance is primarily a concept, something that's not tangible. When you enter into a city that does not have protections, how do you feel internally about possibly being found out as a trans person? I myself don't necessarily feel as safe as I do in Missoula, where I know that I would have legal recourse should something happen.
Well, I wrote a book, so I'm kind of out there. So I don't know if I can really address that. And it's not just been through the ordinances, but being involved in, pride activities throughout the state. I remember when we went to Kalispell a few years ago, the first time, and, there were some real concerns, and we had some discussions about, the possibility and whether we really wanted to go and some of those things. And at that point, frankly, I did have that fear. We had a safety person come and talk to us about, what to do and how to act so as not to provoke those things. And I think about that all the time, and all it takes is one shooter. So and I'm sure Jamie and others do too, think about those things. And I just pray that it never happens. But it doesn't, I don't know that it's silenced anybody. I mean, I agree with Nikki that there is a point, there has been a point in this movement where we have recognized inertia, and it's not going to stop. It's bigger than any of us, and bigger than all of us, and so I don't think about those too often, and yet it's present in every. I guess I didn't think about it today till you mentioned it, so that's good.
All right, I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll hand it over to Heidi to wrap up. Go for it.
Since all of you are activists now and very informed, how would you talk to people that are, working in the social justice field on burnout? Because policy change is so hard, and there are so many, it feels like there's so many falls before the wins.
Oh boy. Burnout is a real thing. I mean, it definitely is a real thing. You have to celebrate your wins. And I think that's what Diversity Day is about. I mean, and actually this is reverberating much farther than just celebrating a win here in Missoula. When we started the campaign in Helena, and Bobby was a part of our steering committee, and so was Nikki, both of you can attest to this, one of the major goals of the ordinance was not just policy, it was building community. And it's something that's carrying on into the Bozeman campaign, and I hope it carries into every campaign, making sure that there's events that aren't overtly political, that are dances, art openings, music, getting 450 pieces or 400 pieces or whatever it was of fried chicken donated and having a big barbecue at the fairgrounds, making sure people feel like they're part of something bigger than just a couple pieces of paper that a body is voting on, which is incredibly important. I find a lot of strength in that. And yeah, I mean, that's my advice, to celebrate your wins. It's hard, but it's also really wonderful too.
Well, I'm just going to say one thing. People pay me to talk, okay? So that's what I do. One of the things that I have realized is that we have to recognize one another against that potential. And we have to, I think of Jamie. I was talking to a couple of different people today about that. And if this movement has, taken up inertia, Jamie Greer's right at dead center. He's the epicenter of this movement. Every ordinance, every action, every event, every activity, there's Jamie. And so we have to recognize that. We have to pump each other up.
And I can't speak, I haven't been nearly as involved in policy as everyone else on this panel, but I can speak a little bit in being involved in activism over the past 5 or so years, which is quite a long while for someone who's only 18 years old. So I think just as far as, staying, being involved in the activism side of it is just making sure that people have a personal and emotional connection to the issues, and then also investing in our younger generation, because people burn out and move on and step down, and it's up to the younger generation to step up and fill those shoes and make sure that the younger generation is aware and inspired and excited to become the next generation of activists and policymakers. And that's one of the alternate routes that we can take.
I just want to say that even watching this reading that was 3 years ago, it's kind of remarkable to me how far the world has come in 3 years. And prior to the internet, the last 3 years was probably more like, it was like 17 years in pre-internet. It's like dog years and people years now. And so, I mean, some of this stuff just looked like, well, now we're talking about like 50 some odd senators, many of whom came out in the last 2 weeks for gay marriage. I mean, it's fast. And sometimes I've done a lot of feminist work in my life, and it's hard sometimes to kind of look at, we seem to be going 5 steps forward in some areas, and then there's an entire contingent that really does not like women, heterosexual women in particular, and this little thing called the war on women. And so it's kind of disheartening as someone who is maybe in their 40s to look at and go, well, wait a minute, we're going so far with this aspect of human rights, civil rights, but we're kind of going backwards in others. And so that is kind of hard for me. One of the best things I ever read on the internet about this thing that Missoula did was humorous, and because humor played, I think, a big part in kind of like the stress of, let's keep a perspective on this. The Not My Bathroom folks started a Facebook page, and so they were all coming into this Facebook page to commiserate about what was going to happen to their bathrooms and so on and so forth, and so like 1,000 people overnight who were all pro ordinance friended them and infiltrated their Facebook page. And one of the comments was, I can't take my family to Splash, Montana, the water park here in Missoula, if this ordinance passes. And the comments were hilarious from the folks that were us that had infiltrated the page. They were things like, you mean the gays can swim? And so I think I had to get a new keyboard when I read that, because my keyboard was full of water or something. So I think, that kind of, I don't know, that has no point, other than there is humor that helps.
Yeah, a couple of the words humor and also celebration come to mind as ways in which, in the midst of activism, which might be pretty intense at times, you can push on through and really glory in those opportunities to accomplish something. So this is a little different than how you might sustain over the long haul with activism, but in the midst of this pretty intense process over a number of months in adopting this ordinance in Missoula, and I won't speak for any other council members, but I would say that for me, it was a point in time where it was, in fact, the only time during my tenure on council where I felt any real concern for either myself or my family's physical safety. Some of the calls that I was greeted to on my answering machine at home were not exactly cordial, and it was the one and only time where the city council actually took some measures to do a little bit of training in terms of safety in the event of the unthinkable during a public hearing. But countering that, on the celebratory side, walking with a group of hundreds of folks from Caris Park to the city council chambers, united and galvanized in passing this ordinance, was the counterpoint to that, and told me this is absolutely worthwhile. Jump ahead a little bit in time. Another little vignette that comes to mind is and I don't know if anyone mentioned it here earlier tonight, but the Montana legislature, at least some members of it, did their best to try to nullify Missoula's ordinance. And so a number of us did take the trek to Helena to testify to the House Judiciary Committee on this very issue. And one thing that truly warmed my heart was I had my 4-year-old daughter at the time with me, and we were sitting in the front row getting ready to I was getting ready to testify, but my daughter was there on the floor crushing fish crackers into the carpet of this hearing room, and there's Reverend Harris Himes testifying in front of me that this is an abomination, this ordinance. So for me, it was a matter of integrating what I was doing in terms of activism into the rest of my family life, and I think providing hopefully a very valuable civics lesson for my daughter.
So the things that come to mind are self-care and long view. On self-care, I'm not going to get the adage quite right, but actually Dave might know it better than I would, but I think among emergency responders or rescue folks, there's an adage that when you go in to rescue someone, you need to take care of yourself too, because if you get hurt, we're now double the problem, half the resources. So I think it's really important for folks who are working in advocacy to remember that you are a resource in a lot of ways. You need to protect yourself. You need to take care of yourself. And you have to trust that when you step away and take care of yourself, that the work will go on. There are going to be people there who will step in and fill that gap. You aren't that important. People will be able to take the work on while you step away. It'll be okay. And also, you can have a lot of faith knowing that there will be work there for you when you're ready to come back. And on the long view, the city of San Francisco was not the first city to, or municipality, or state, or any, or local, or government entity to recognize a domestic partnership registry. The first domestic partnership registry was not in the city of San Francisco because Mayor Dianne Feinstein, then Mayor Dianne Feinstein, vetoed it. And when I think about that, someone who is an incredibly strong ally to the LGBT community, someone who is incredibly progressive and has worked tirelessly throughout her career to advance LGBT equality in a lot of other areas, that early on there are missteps. Early on there are missteps all the time, and history doesn't look back too kindly on them. But looking forward, we can look forward with a lot of faith, knowing that, yes, there are going to be setbacks for sure. But when you look over the course of any of these issues that we work on, that any of us work on, for the most part, you see these issues moving in one direction only. It's not easy by any stretch. There have been days I've been sitting in the hallway of a Capitol and thinking, what the hell? And it did not help me to think about Dianne Feinstein. But when I was able to take some more time and reflect on it, I was reminded that there is only one direction that most of these issues are going in, and I get a chance to help move it in that direction. So the long view helps.
Thank you so much, Nikki. All right, I'm going to introduce Heidi Wallace, but if we could just have one more round of applause for our awesome panelists. Thank you.
So my name is Heidi Wallace, as you know, and I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and I really want to extend a thank you to our panelists, and especially for all the amazing work that you do every day and all day. I also want to thank our community readers for taking the time to really share the words of a passionate conversation that really did shape our community and hopefully our state, and preserve this beauty and safety and well-being for every generation to come. We wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for a very special human, and we have a special connection because we were both born in Wolf Point, and that'll be for later. We could talk about that more. But Gregory Hinton, who is a playwright, author, filmmaker, what I love about what you do is that you do want to share the words and preserve the history that is so important for us. And I want to thank you and honor you, and I'm going to honor our time too, so you can just wave, and I'm going to encourage everybody. He got out of speaking up front. He's so happy. He's going to be here tomorrow night too. I want to invite all of you to tomorrow night's Diversity Day Celebration Part 2. That's organized by our Youth Advisory Council, and it's going to be a wonderful, fun evening of eclectic performances ranging from plays by the elementary students to bands and hip hop and spoken word. It's going to be really great. And I just want to say a little bit about NCBI, in that we are all here because we care about our community, and we care about teaching and educating each other. And absolutely my most favorite part of my job is being present for these compassionate conversations that really truly change hearts and minds. And so all of us in this room, we deserve a big thank you and applause for everything that we do. And thank you again, Caitlin. You're such a good facilitator. Yes. So have a great rest of your evening, and thank you again for being here.
Ha ha ha.